I couldn't remember if you came to it or not. So you know how it functions. You know how it goes. Sally,
Yep, and I did read chapter 5 and 6.
Yeah. So the way this works is we will listen to the Bible being read here in a little bit, and we're in Daniel chapter 6. Yeah, chapter 6 today, and we just kind of listen to it, and then we talk about kind of what we heard and all that stuff afterwards. And so that's kind of how this functions. We read it out of the New King James Version, but that's not because we think the New King James Version is the best. We do that because the dramatized version that we have is a good sounding dramatized version, and so but we're a big fan of a multiplicity of translations. So whatever translation you got in front of you, like Ed, he's got the Jewish Study Bible down there. So his Bible he's using isn't even Christian.
This is really old.
Yeah, well, I remember those bopping around the church when I was little. And all those.
And I just happened to have the Polycarp.
A Polycarp.
It's interesting because they have a lot of those.
I have the NIV in front of me, and I also have this Jewish Study Bible too. Jewish Study Bible does not have very many notes in this section. Okay. All right. So we will begin. We'll be doing Daniel chapter 6. Let me share the little screen here. Hit that button. That button. We hit share. All right. Here we go.
It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find no charge or fault, because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him. Then these men said,
"We shall not find any charge against this Daniel, unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God."
So these governors and satraps thronged before the king.
King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter.
Therefore King Darius signed the written decree. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. And in his upper room, with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree.
Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?
The thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter.
That Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day.
And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men approached the king.
Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed.
So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel,
Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you.
Then a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signets of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. Now the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. Also, his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel,
Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?
O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you.
Now the king was exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions overpowered them, and broke all their bones in pieces, before they ever came to the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote,
To all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions.
So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian.
Well, that's the end of that chapter.
It's such an exciting, uplifting chapter.
A lot of it in Daniel is. A lot of it in Daniel. Super uplifting. Okay, so probably one of the more famous stories in Daniel here. What what stood out to you here? What stood out to you?
Daniel's like 90 years old here.
Daniel's like 90 years old.
Yeah. I mean, he was 20 when he was captured. It was 70 years under the other two, under the previous administrations before the Medes and Persians. Gotta be old.
Yeah.
Makes me feel
Pretty
young.
accurate in the narration because it's an older man's voice.
Yeah, you can hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. So like that, he definitely would have been older there. It's, and this is me trying to get myself into trouble there. It's, you know, like the 70 years of the other thing, like that's a very convenient number.
I understand.
Like that's when you're doing math like that. You're doing math to literature that is uninterested in that math being all that
Okay.
hardcore.
But he is
yeah,
old.
but he
Been
is
there a
old.
long time, 'cause there's
He
three other
he
kings
is
before this.
he is old. Like, and I think that matters. That matters in the story. Like he is old. Like, so what else? What else?
Still interesting that they referred to him as his Jewish name in the text versus his the names that Nebuchadnezzar gave to them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Belteshazzar or whatever his name was. Is that what they called him? Yeah. And so, which is his Babylonian name, slave name, whatever, like all that stuff like that. Yeah, the book constantly refers to him by his Hebrew name, Danny, which is interesting. Carol, you were saying something.
How many times has he called Daniel's God as the great God?
Yeah.
Daniel worships his God.
This is constantly being, yeah. Well, it's changing kings.
It still shows God in control.
Yeah. And this is an important distinction. And one of the reasons why we're going through Daniel is that, yeah, it shows that God's control and kind of shows these kings almost kind of being forced into this view, like that's Exodus plays this game too with Pharaoh. But Pharaoh, his heart keeps getting hard. There's a couple times where it seems like Pharaoh is finally going to relent, and then he just doesn't, right? And then it goes to his, downfall in the sea. But
the other thing I want to mention that I could mention too is the fact that when the Exodus occurred, God pointed to the Jewish people, the Hebrews, that they were going to be his word to the world, that they were going to branch out and explain to everybody, the Gentiles, that who God is and bring the word to the world. And yet they kind of fell on the wayside and went a different way and forgot about who God was. And then he moved them to captivity, and he's now using the leaders of the Babylonian Empire to try to bring them into under his basically to teach the Hebrews a lesson.
Yeah, so it's there is a constant drumbeat all throughout the faith of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is that the world will declare his praises. Like that is a drumbeat, and Daniel hits that drumbeat pretty hard. And that's one of the reasons why we're kind of going through it here. That's why before we get to Revelation and all that stuff, that's a drumbeat that is being hit, and you see it happening through some scummy people, but not doing it through scummy ways. Like that
needs clearing up.
So the people that are trying to trap Daniel in this story are pretty scummy, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're going over there, but there's no like weird coercion that Daniel is doing. That's like, oh man, if I can just I'll force this issue onto the king and all these people in Babylon by creating these bad laws and all that stuff, like to force everyone into worship and all that stuff. Like that doesn't happen, right? It's always off of testimony, and so so that's it's not, and every story is like that going in here, is that they are simply faithful. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are faithful. Like Daniel keeps showing his faithfulness. You have all these, these kings keep chasing after their pride, right? And they get humbled for whatever reason, and God is still kind of shown faithful in all of that. So I don't know if I explained it well enough, but that's what else kind of stood out to you there?
I wondered if there was any significance about the stone being placed over the mouth of the den and the king sealing it with his ring. And
Yeah.
then going to the den at the light of dawn. It reminds me of Jesus being buried and the stone being rolled.
There is a lot of similarity with that. And that was one of my questions that I was going to ask is why is this story so popular? And I think that's probably one of the reasons. Now, I think we made the story popular and then the story kind of has a life of its own because that is never the story that I was told as a kid, like that's, like when in Sunday school and all that stuff, it's always just Daniel in the lion's den and God, followed him through and yada, yada, yada. But, I kind of think that probably the original reason why it's so popular is that it sounds real familiar, like these people that are like the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all the religious people, like not liking Daniel and not liking Jesus and this sham trial type of thing, and throw him behind the tomb. How long was he in the tomb? Was it one night or is it more than
Yeah, one.
What is it? One? Where is that? I was looking for that.
In the lion's den one night.
Yeah, he's in there one night.
Read the Apocrypha, he was in there a week.
Oh, he was in a week in the Apocrypha?
Oh, wow.
Gloria's been doing the Apocrypha lately.
Remember how the birds came and fed one of the prophets? It was a similar story.
Oh, really? So the Apocrypha, Daniel's in there a week, and the birds are feeding him, and all those things.
I don't think it was the birds.
It was some creatures.
It was a similar story.
Yeah. That's fun. That's fun. Like that. That's fun. Because Daniel, like timeline wise, gets close to the Apocrypha. Like that's but yeah, I think, Elaine, like what you're saying there is like I think that's one of the reasons why this has stood out as one of the leading stories. Like it sounds like the Easter. It sounds like Holy Week and Easter and all these things. Like he was shut up behind this tomb and then it comes out. Early in the morning he woke up and came running down to the tomb and all these things. Like the verbiage is almost identical, which makes me kind of think that gospel writers are probably doing that intentionally too, to bring us back to the story of Daniel as we think of the resurrection.
If you're continuing that theme, the only thing that it's confusing then is after Christ's resurrection, unless you're talking about Revelation, the concept of throwing the other governors and their wives and their kids all into the dens. Yeah. I don't. That's the only connection I would be that would be Revelation.
Yeah. So Fred, you wanted to say something a little bit ago.
I'm saying again, just what he said, the vengefulness of the people that were wronged. Is this a Middle Eastern kind of trait thing? Certainly the Germans wouldn't do anything like that.
They never do anything vengeful.
It doesn't seem like God should be vengeful, at least like that.
Okay.
I asked that question once, why are the children killed? And the pastor that had the Bible study says, because they have sin in them when they're born.
That was his answer? Just matter of fact. Well, that's like just because they have sin in them when they were born. That's why they died. Well, that's.
Why am I still here?
In my notes, it says that in accordance with Persian custom.
What does that mean? What part? The killing of the kids and wives?
Yeah, so that's the leader who's doing that. That doesn't have anything to do with God. That's the guy.
Yeah. Which, and so I would like to point that out in this. There's, in these literature stuff, you see this game being played where like we saw it with, which one was it? Was it when Daniel interpreted the dream or something? And the king Nebuchadnezzar like does this decree and basically like everything he was saying about himself and like you need to serve him or you're all gonna die. He's like, Daniel's God, you guys need to serve him or you're all gonna die, which like it's like missing the point. like that's like missing the point of this God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I think some of that is here too with like what we see this capital punishment kind of going towards all those satraps and all of that, because it definitely it does a couple different things. Them killing the entire family. We are in verse 24 for those that are wondering. When they kill the whole family, like say, and let's see. So I'll just read to verse 24. And the king gave the command, and they brought these men who had accused Daniel. When they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives, and the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones to pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. There's no hyperbole going on in this at all. Like it's factual stuff, like all these things. But I think it says something to that it shows them the strictness of the command of death that the king would have given to them. It's not just to them, but it's the destruction of their entire family.
The Jewish Bible says the importance of family identity in the ancient Near East could result in family members receiving the same punishment as the male leader.
Yeah. And I think, and that right there, what Ed just said, I think when we're looking at this and that punishment there, that there is a cultural thing that was so far from us. Because as Americans, we're phenomenally independent. Like that's weird for like it's the individual and all of those things. Like that idea of the individual and all that stuff is written like nowhere in the scriptures. Like just no one would have had it. Like that's just so like if you're reading like individualistic verses or something like that, like it just didn't exist back then the way it does now with us. And so that's a translation that you have to do when you're reading the Bible, like that, all those things. Because think about how it talks about all these guys, like Abraham. Like you realize that there are a lot of people with Abraham, like that's, and when he's moving around, like all those people are moving with him, but yet it says just Abraham. Like that's, so that's, this kind of idea is it's always together.
Also, when didn't God give the decree to Joshua when he took the promised land that he was supposed to wipe out all of those that were in the promised land ahead of him? Everything, and all the way down to animals as well. Nothing should have laid. There should be nothing laid left other than the Hebrews after he entered the promised land. But yet we find in the text there were Canaanites, there were others, Moabites, and everything else left behind that Joshua's armies never totally.
Well, that's what makes the Syrophoenician woman so fun in Jesus' gospel. Like that's she's part of these groups of people that were said of in Joshua, oh yeah, we got rid of them all, but they're all still there. That's kind of the funny thing about Judges too, is that you encounter all these people, and so yeah, like that's like things are kind of handled differently. So we have to like translate some of that in our own mind. So yeah, we talked about the stone, and we talked about like that is like this tombing thing. So here's my encouragement on that. Like when you're telling people about the story of Daniel, bring up the stone, bring up like that. I think that's the original reason why it's gotten popular. And I think that has gotten lost, like that part of the translation. So like, I don't think you have to tell, I think you can tell people, it's like, hey, this sounds like the resurrection of Jesus, the death and resurrection of Jesus. But I think you could just say like the stone and like wanting in the morning, and I think kids will be able to recognize it, you know, like that's never part of the story that you really hear anymore. So I want to talk about the governors and the satraps near the beginning of the story. What do you think of them?
The interesting thing, my translations refer to them as presidents.
Presidents, okay, yeah.
St. Polycarp referred to them as presidents.
Yeah. So like think about, well, that's they are government officials. They are important people, right? And they don't like Daniel. They don't like his old body waving around like over there, you know. Like
well, weren't they afraid because Darius looked at as Daniel favorably, and they were afraid that he was going to be the second in command soon?
Does it say that?
Almost does, yeah.
Like that's where.
It says he was distinguished.
Yeah.
Everyone else.
Mm-hmm. So it comes back to our old friend power, right?
Greed and power.
Greed and power. It's amazing what greed and power. Yeah, verse 3. It's amazing what greed and power can do there. And you see how they manipulate the king too. They're like they manipulate his desire to be king, right? They manipulate like, oh, king, live forever. You know, like that's live forever. You know, may let's see, what do they say to him? Let's see here. Let's see.
I also look at it as fear.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, they fear that their influence in society is waning, so they don't want to lose that.
Oh, you can't. Well, that's that power there. Like that's like like people always worry that their influence is waning, and so they just like it's the groups that fear that their influence is waning. They usually get all litigious, you know. It's the groups that are doing that are, you know, the ones that are trying to put down the hard edicts and all of these things. Like that's, and so like you see these guys and they're like, oh, like you need to, like let's see. So they came like King Darius live forever, and what do they say to him? You know, all of the governors and everyone, you know, like we would establish a royal statute to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, we will call it King Darius month. We will call it Dari, you know, like that's, and like no one can be lactose intolerant during that time. And like, and you shall be cast into the lions. They shall be cast in the lion's den. And, you know, and he's like, oh man, that sounds great. You know, and not really thinking about Daniel or anything like that. And that's kind of why this also reminds me of the beheading of John the Baptist too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like it really reminds me of the beheading of John the Baptist, because you have this feckless king that wants to show off and be all big and bad in front of his buddies. And it's like, look at the power I have. I could give half of my kingdom, you know? And he gives it to this girl. And she says, I want the head of John the Baptist. And like, and you know, like I remember that was when we were doing through the Mark sermon series. Like I always made a point of saying like John the Baptist died because this feckless king and because of this dance of a little girl, you know, the sexy dance of an underage girl, you know, like it's so despicable. And like this kind of feels that same way. Like it's just despicable, and Daniel's been nothing but faithful the whole time.
Well, that's like the top four. That's what Jeff said. He said power and greed. And then you throw in some fear, and then you throw in some sex.
Yep.
And now you have a raging tornado.
Yeah.
It's gonna hit the.
I don't know if there's too much sex in this one, but yes, in the John the Baptist.
Yeah. That's what I'm
Like,
talking
yeah.
about.
Oh, and it's, yeah, and you see it all over the place. And I think that's also why this story remains so high, is that you see this everywhere, like that's where people in power are threatened, and they start threatening everything around,
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of a repeat if you think about it, because earlier in the text, didn't he throw his Nebuchadnezzar throw his friends into the fire, trying to torch them in the fire because they would not bow down to the statue?
Oh, are you talking yeah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, this is really similar. It's really similar, like where they throw them, and you kind of get the same kind of hyperbole in there.
The exact same thing is they set them up. They had the people were afraid they're going to lose their power, and set up the three of them and went back to the king, said they're not bowing down to your statue, so you got to throw them in based upon the laws of the Persians and Medes.
Yeah, the Medes and the Persians, right? So you're seeing that this story moves in these waves. It's a cyclical nature, like the same thing kind of keeps on being said over and over and over again. And as we get into the backside of Daniel with these visions, it's actually kind of more of the same, but he becomes more cryptic as we go through it here. And so, as we kind of go through it there, you're going to see that, and that's kind of we're seeing it in the Jesus story, like that's, and you see it in all these other stories. This power just becomes overwhelming and all that. So is there anything else that stands out to us in this?
I was just always fascinated that those lions could kill and eat everybody before they even touched the ground.
Shout out to
They
the
were
lions.
hungry. They were hungry. They didn't eat for 24 hours because
And I think you see something there that you think about why is that verse written like that? I think it's like, this is going to sound weird. It's super fun, a phrase like that is, I think, the same as the fire was so hot that the people that were throwing them into the fire was consuming them, Great. Like it just lights your imagination on fire. It's impossible to not try to picture that and what that's like in your own mind, and I think that's the same way with this, which is what makes it so great. But it also says something about the lions, that the lions were that ravenous while Daniel was there too, because it's not a huge amount of time between one and the other. So it's also like this is showing us a cue as to how much of a miracle it was. It's not like the lions were like the lions at Animal Kingdom or something like that, Lion Country Safari. That
You don't mention Detroit.
I think in the Jewish Bible, it says that they possibly didn't even have those lions dens back there, and they were just inserted that in this story to bring that one idea of concept of.
Okay.
You read that Jewish Bible, but
Oh, they go crazy on. So the Jewish Bible. Let's talk about it. So what I like about the Jewish Bible is in our Christian Protestantism, all right, Protestant, we're kind of like all that stuff. One of our things that I think is not our best attribute, but in ourselves deep, is that we think that there's one correct story and narrative, right? That there's one correct. And here's the deal. Like, we think that we have the correct story and narrative here, but you know who else who thinks they have the correct story and narrative? Like the people in the ELCA, or you got the Baptists down the street, or the Pentecostals, and all this stuff. So it just happened. And what we do is we go, oh, well, they got it wrong. You know,
Took several narratives and put them together.
yeah. And
Or the Eastern Orthodox.
Orthodox or something like that. It's kind of the original schism, like that. So, but the Hebrew scholarship, they have, what's interesting about this, and this is the book I'm talking about here. And what's interesting about it, I mean, this is not Christian perspective at all. This is, if you went to a synagogue, this is what they have in there. And all their scholarship, they don't care if they disagree with one another. Like like one of these notes will say one thing and it'll disagree with it on the other thing. If you pick up the Lutheran Study Bible, they go out of their way to make sure none of that stuff disagrees. And also you'll hear people say this in the church, where like, oh, well, this text disagrees with this other text over here. How do you reconcile that? Listen, I shouldn't even say this.
Say it.
Don't be the devil on the shoulder. Like that. It's first off, I don't give a rip. It disagrees. Who cares?
I'm with you.
Like that, that's like we're wanting it to function in a way that it obviously isn't. And the Hebrew people did not care if it disagreed. Like they just didn't care. And oftentimes we're trying to make it function, make the Bible function in a way that it was never, I don't want to say it like this, but I will, that it was ever designed to. Because the design in this is not like, design is not the word how what I would use and how we got this. It just wasn't designed to function that way. It's designed to function how to tell you about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and how his people have functioned with him. Like that's it. That's the goal of this. And the Hebrew people, they get their entire identity and who they are and how they study from Jacob. They got it from Jacob. And Jacob, and this is one of my favorite stories to tell. I tell it all the time, but so you guys have heard it before probably. But like it's this foundational little story. There's always rabbi stories, you know, where someone comes up like rabbi, you know, and the rabbi and this guy comes up to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I just saw God. You know, I just saw God, and the rabbi looks at him and says, you just saw God. And he has him he's like, turn around for me. And he turns around and he's like, well, walk to that side of the room, then walk back. And he does all that. And the rabbi goes, you saw God? He's like, where's your limp? Where's your limp? You see, our father Jacob, he saw God. He saw God. And he wrestled with him till the morning. And he came away with a limp. Right? And that's the reason why I like that story, is that when you talk about people that know how the Hebrews study the Bible, the story of Jacob is key to it. And because of this, what did Jacob's name was changed after the wrestles? What was it changed to?
Israel.
What does Israel mean in Hebrew? So it says he changed his name, and then it defines it in the text. It defines it. It says he changed his name to Israel because it means he wrestles with God. Israel means wrestles with God. Right? That's what it means. Their identity as a people is wrestles with God. The problem is in Protestantism, we're like, oh, I don't want to wrestle with God. It's settled. It's settled. This is the correct belief. and all that stuff. What hogwash? Maybe we need to get a little bit of Israel left. That's why I like to do this study like this, because we wrestle with it. We wrestle with the text. It's why these notes in this Hebrew Study Bible can disagree, because they're wrestling. It's active. It's not passive. It's active. We may call the Word of God this active thing and all that stuff, but we don't believe it. Ed.
You don't see in this particular chapter, but a lot of times in the Jewish Study Bible, they'll give 3 or 4 interpretations of what happened.
Yeah.
And define each one. The Septuagint said this,
Yeah, and it's fine with those 4 being out there. Like that's, and so so a lot of times, I think I make people nervous when I talk like this, where I go like, well, this is my belief, but this is what these people believe, this is what these people believe, and all that stuff. And that's fine. That's fine. You can disagree with me on stuff. You have every right to be wrong.
But didn't God say that he deliberately is going to leave out various details because it's not us to know, but us to struggle with?
And I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it. Like and so when we see these things, all these things in here in Daniel are rhyming and they sound familiar and like, man, all of a sudden it sounds like the crucifixion and the resurrection narrative, which reading this again, I'm like, yeah, like those gospel writers, probably the way they told that story was like, they're like, hey, you remember how God saved Daniel? All these sorry saps sold him out, like all that stuff. And people came early in the morning and all that stuff. It sounds familiar. And it's like, oh, look at that. It's just like what we talked about this last Sunday with Judas Maccabeus and all these Jesus coming into all those shouts of Hosanna, Hosanna. Sounds just like the Maccabean revolt and all these things. Because it all kind of rhymes. It all kind of looks together. But where Judas Maccabeus, I think he was serving powerful ends. Like we see Jesus throw off all that power. Like that's to let you know my opinion of the Maccabees.
Wasn't there also a time when also David rode into Jerusalem as well on a donkey?
David?
Yeah.
David ride a donkey? Solomon lost his donkeys. Like that, and I always had a funny joke about that I had to be careful how I said it. And like that.
That's the name of my garage.
He
Solomon
lost his donkeys. Yeah, Solomon lost his donkeys. Well, Solomon was so ill-equipped for the job he couldn't even keep track of his own, and so like that's. But that's, yeah, he lost his donkeys. David did ride something like that. But I think that the context is a little different. But yeah. But yeah, so I'm trying to remember because we did King.
Yeah, I missed it. Yeah, it was his son Samuel or Solomon did ride a mule.
Okay, yeah.
It was Solomon, not David.
Yeah. So this Daniel thing, I think we're seeing how this all kind of goes forward and plays out here. Did anyone have any other thoughts? We could actually read 7 here before we.
I was just thinking when you said that Solomon rode in when David when he was anointed king. Solomon was David's son, so Christ riding on a mule into Jerusalem as the son of David.
Yeah. Well, as that Messiah, that son of David is that Messiah. That's Messiah language, like that. Do what?
You don't want it to sound.
It's long.
Well, it's not long. It's as you get into this, the beast.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a lot of interpretation.
Yeah. Well, let's read 7 because do we need to talk about Daniel anymore? Daniel in the lion's den? I think we did it. Let's read 7 and we'll end there. And so, because we've got 10 minutes, and I'm going to be writing 2 weeks from now is Wednesday's sermon in 20 minutes. So, like over there. All right, so let's just read 7, because seven's going to be heavy. 7's going to be heavy. So 2 times reading it. We'll read it at the beginning of next week too.
It's interesting because Daniel has been interpreting dreams up until now, and now it's his dream.
Yeah. Now it's reloading, Vance. Now it's reloading.
It's not my fault.
Yeah, see. All right, here we go.
Don't fight, you guys.
In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts.
I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly, another beast, a second, like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it,
Arise, devour much flesh.
After this I looked, and there was another, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there, in this horn, were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain, and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and a glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away. And his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near to one of those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things.
Those great beasts, which are four kings, which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever.
Then I wished to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue with its feet, and the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints, and prevailing against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Thus he said,
The fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings, who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand, for a time and times and half a time. But the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion, and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven, shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him.
This is the end of the account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly troubled me, and my countenance changed. But I kept the matter in my heart.
Don't worry, I kept the matter in my heart. Oh my goodness. All right, so I think I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but that last beast that's like the horn and like all that stuff. When Jesus is talking to the chief priest, Caiaphas, I think, and Caiaphas, like, Jesus says something and he like rips his garments and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure, if my memory's good, it may be something later here, but I think it's that fourth one there, that Jesus is calling him that. And that's why that chief priest like rips his, like, can't you tell he's giving blasphemy?
I interpret it sounds like Revelation type language.
Yeah.
And the other thing I find that's interesting, when people who are anti-Trinity they actually, in Daniel, he brings in both 2 portions of the Trinity in there. He talks about the most high, the Almighty, and he also talks the Son of Man. Both of them are in there.
Okay, yeah. Like it's, yeah. So we'll talk more about this next week. I'll figure out that if that's what Jesus was doing with this one, or if it's later in Daniel. But yeah, we're doing Daniel to get ready for Revelation, getting everyone set up so that we can disappoint you in Revelation. and all those things. But it's talking like, if you can't tell what's happening, is we're getting these big visions of Daniel. It's no different than the stories we've had before. It's all about power and the misuse of power, right? Like that's the tempting thing, is to always do signs of the times, and that's not really what's happening. Like we can see how power is being used today, but like these things are more universal than like, oh, that's that person, you know. So, all right. So for everyone that's watching online, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for watching.